You know by now, the right has been focused for a solid 2 years at least on absolutely demonizing the trans community, the broader LGBTQ plus community on a daily basis. And that isn't just in rhetoric. It's not just in their news and media figures obsessing over the topic. No, it has a real legislative impact. In states around the country, these anti-trans bills are popping up more and more. And we wanted to bring on someone to break down the impact of it, what's being proposed, what has already passed. And so we are very lucky to be joined on the program by the founder and CEO of Translash, Mara Jones. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I wish we could be talking about topics related to the trans community that were more positive, productive, but unfortunately, the right has been very focused on this for some time. So I think people are starting to be more aware of these bills. What are we generally talking about when we talk about these anti-trans bills that are being proposed and or passed?
Well, we're talking about a series of bills that are growing both in scope and the issues that they tackle. Kind of the bread and butter, the mainstay copycat bills that they have are about trans sports, banning trans people from sports which match their gender, and as well equal access to healthcare for trans teens, broadly referred to as gender affirming care. But this year we're seeing those bread and butter sort of copycat bills that have spread throughout the various networks that Christian nationalists have set up to do this type of thing. They're adding to that pronoun bills. So there's a bill to ban the ability of people in Arizona and elsewhere to use pronouns other than those that are on birth certificates. We are seeing bills such as the draconian bill in Oklahoma to actually ban equal access to healthcare for trans people up through the age of 26. And we're also seeing more broadly the introduction of these drag bills, which from the perspective of Christian nationalists intersect with trans issues because drag is out from their perspective outside of the gender binary and something to be squashed. So I think what we're seeing is an expansion of their strategy, a more aggressive strategy. And not only are we seeing the types of bills, but just the number of bills just continues to increase.
Yeah, you mentioned that 26-year mark there. We keep being told this is about protecting children and stopping grooming and all that. And yet in Florida, they're talking about removing access to this sort of care for everyone, full on adults. Like no one should have access to this. You mentioned the 26. Is the kid or the youth thing, is that just a ruse? It feels like it goes way beyond that in general.
Well, one of the most interesting things about the entire conversation around kids is that it's a manufactured conversation by the Christian nationalist movement. We know that they undertook a couple of years of focus grouping. What were the ways that they could get the public most uncomfortable with the eye of trans people? And their focus groups directed them towards the issue of trans youth. So then they began to construct an entire kind of infrastructure to gin up these false narratives and false claims about trans youth. So we have to understand that the conversation about trans kids is manufactured, and pretty much everything that you're hearing from that side is totally made up. And secondly, they're even sort of saying the quiet part out loud now by feeling comfortable enough to begin to expand it to trans adults. And the whole point is that the same groups behind the anti-trans movement are also behind the anti-abortion movement. And they understand that you use legislation to test out what is socially acceptable. And when you find out what those bounds are, you just get more aggressive in pushing them. So if the 26 bill passes, they'll get more aggressive and they'll start banning and restricting trans healthcare for adults much more widely and kind of across the board. So, I mean, this is all a part of a playbook.
You mentioned how a lot of these bills and the rhetoric has been focused on drag shows. And obviously, as we repeatedly say, these are not the same communities. It's an art form, one is a demographic group. But obviously the right is trying to make people think that these are synonymous, that I guess everyone who's trans does drag, every single person, and all of it is designed to target children in a predatory fashion. What I find most insidious about this is they're providing this intentional misinformation about a community and about an art form that most people probably don't have that much information about to begin with. So what do people need to understand about the way these two things are being conflated, the ways that they're different? What accurate information should people have about this?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think when it's intentional, it's actually disinformation, right? So we're talking about a campaign to disinform, and it's not a campaign to misinform. Misinformation is largely out of error, disinformation is out of intent. So this is a disinformation campaign. And there's overlap clearly between trans and drag communities, because as you say, drag is an art form. And so there are trans people that do drag, there are gays and also lesbians who do drag, and there are cis people who also do drag. So drag is a very kind of expansive category. But I think that if you look at it from the Christian nationalist perspective, and even views that are informed by transphobia, I mean, largely people in this country are trained through transphobia and through the media. The film Disclosure lays this out, to think of trans people as just being drag. I mean, we are taught to think of trans people as just, men in dresses, for example, which is drag. And that's not what trans is. And so what they're doing is they are playing off of the larger stereotype of transphobia to advance this a larger agenda that they have against trans people, and reinforcing what they believe are biblically descended roles for men and women. And so that's what's driving a large part of this. And so I think we have to understand it not from the nuances that we may understand, but from their perspective, these things are the same thing. And that's why they've kind of expanded the battlefront this year to include drag.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.